All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to this part of the series where we're going through freeCodeCamp's Getting a Developer Certificate program, and we are in the middle of the forms where we're trying to build a registration form. And if you don't know me, my name's Rob. I'm with PreCodeCamp, and where I typically instruct students on how to become a web developer. And I decided to take this journey and approach it as a student slash instructor, where I'm going to be going through it. And again, I haven't gone through the freeCodeCamp's culture. I can go ahead and explain things as we go through it. And sometimes people, they do get stuck on certain steps. I know that with the instructions, the way that they are put in there, that may confuse people as well. But again, I'm going to go through it, and if you do get stuck on something, there's a chaptered list down below this video that should be able to help you out when it comes to where the process are you when it comes to the freeCodeCamp adventure, right? So anyways, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go through steps number 40, and usually I do blocks of 20, but it goes all the way up to 65. So we're just going to round this out here. We're going to go 41 to 65 in this lesson here. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we're starting off with number 41 with the Learn HTML Forms by building a registration form for freeCodeCamp. Now it says here that to give the campers an idea of what to put in their bio, let's go ahead and utilize the placeholder attribute. Now you can put these placeholder attributes really on input fields. You can put them on text areas, okay? And it just gives you an idea of what kind of goes in there. We've all seen it before. Hey, on this form here, please type your email. Please type your password, right? And it's just placeholder text that doesn't get saved or sent anywhere. It just gives the user that visual cue, okay? So we're going to come down here to our text area, and we want to go ahead and add a placeholder. So again, the order doesn't matter where you place this on here, but we're just going to do placeholder. And then we want to set that equal to, and then the string that it gave us. So I'm going to come up here and make sure that I grab everything properly. And it looks like up to including the 3 dots. I want to make sure that there are 3 dots in there when this thing finally goes through. All right, so that looks good. Notice that over here, our placeholder text decided to show up in our text area block. Okay, again, you can do this too. Your input fields for the first name, last name, email. And I don't know if that's what we're getting ready to do or not, but it is a possibility. And I don't know if we're going to be changing this to something else, because sometimes they like to tell us to do one thing and then we go and do another. So we got the congratulations. We're moving on to the next. All right, so we are on step number 42 with this, and I did take a quick look at this, a quick glance, and it is pretty tedious on what it's asking us to do here. But it says that for every input field that we have, we need to add this item here called a name attribute, okay? This attribute is used to identify the element when we submit the form. And I get what freeCodeCamp is doing here for us, just setting us up for success. Once this form does get eventually submitted, it'd be nice to have that type of information along with it for the form data, okay? Now it says, except for the 2 radio button input fields, which are already named, go ahead and apply a unique name of your choosing to each one of these. Now, here's the thing, like, we want to think like a developer. We want this to be readable. And what I wouldn't expect from a student would be to type in here, hey, it said unique, so I'm going to do first name 1, 2, 3, 4. That's unique, right? But we want our code to be readable, understandable. That 1, 2, 3, 4 doesn't make any kind of sense. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. I'm going to come back and show you exactly what I did, and then we're going to go ahead and submit it and test out the code. Give me one moment here. All right, so this is what I actually ended up doing. You can see here that I have a name, and I'm setting that equal to first dash name. And it's the exact same ID field. And sometimes as a developer, you're gonna give your either input fields a class or an ID rather, and you're going to simply call it the same thing as the name, right? And it just makes sense as you're reading through it. So I did that to every single one of the input fields that we were working with, minus the radio ones. I'll go ahead and scroll through this, and feel free to pause it to see where do we put it. And maybe the few tricky ones that you might not have thought of, would be the select here. You want that name to be the referrer, and I think that might be the only one. But other than that, every time you see an input field, you want to put a name and set it equal to something that is going to be unique. The next thing that I did want to bring up on here is notice that I did just tack it on to the end of each one. Again, it doesn't matter where it's at. These are attributes, and they can go at the beginning, they can go at the end. It really doesn't matter as far as the browser is concerned. However, for code consistency, you may have some sort of schema set up for your personal, or even when you're in the workforce, to set it up that way as well, as far as what order does things need to go in, okay? But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and check this code. Kathy, congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. All right, we are on step number 43 of building a form registration with the freeCodeCamp. And step 43 says that in the HTML registration form, now that it is finished, let's go ahead and spruce it up a bit. Now let's start by adding some fonts on here. And this is going to take effect for the whole project. That's why we're putting it in the body. And it says it wants to utilize the font family here of Tahoma. And we want to make sure that the font size is 16 pixels inside here. So we're just going to go here to line 7. We're going to do the font family, and we want to set that to Tahoma. Okay. Now we want to make sure we do put a semicolon at the end of this. Okay. We saw some of the text change already. Now I will say this, that with font family, you'll provide several different ones in here that will match with the browser's defaults, right? Meaning that if the font is not installed on that user's computer, then it goes to a backup and a backup, right? And so you can definitely comma separate multiple different font families inside of this one property here in the body. The next thing that we want to do here is we want to make sure that the font size, so font size, and we want to set that to 16 pixels. So we'll see what that looks like here, and there we go. Okay, let's go ahead and check our code, and there we go. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next one. All right, we're on step number 44, where we want to center the H1 and the P elements, and giving them a margin of 1 EM, and also setting the remaining parts here of the left and right. We're going to set that to auto. So it says then we want to also center the text as well to center. So here we first need to identify what elements do we want to attack here, and we can use comma separated elements here. So we can do H1 and P elements, and then we can use those curly brackets. And the first thing that it has us do is says do the margins. So we're going to do margin, and then it says do 1 EM and then auto. Okay. And so remember, when we're utilizing the margin here of 1 EM and then auto, because of the parent element, the EM, it's going to default here to 16 pixels. That is what's defined by the parent. And then over here for the auto, that's going to be in control of our left and right. Okay. And that's what that is doing there. Next, we're going to go ahead and do the center. So we want text align, center, and there we go. And so that will do our margins, that will do our text alignment, and then let's go ahead and check our code. Perfect. We're moving on to the next. On to number 45, let's see what it's having us do here. So it says we want to center the form element by giving that margin of 0. That's going to be 0 on the top and bottom. And then the auto is going to be for left and right. Okay. And so then we want to also fix the maximum width. We want to set that to 500 pixels. Set the minimum width to 300 pixels, and then we want to add a range that would allow it to grow and expand, but we want to go ahead and set it here with 68 VW, which is view width. So let's go ahead and do all this. That was a lot of stuff on one step, but we're going to break it down. And so the first thing is the element. What element do we want to attack here? And that's the form. It says on here we want to do the margin. We want to set that to 0 and then auto. And remember, there's no commas in between here for the margins, so it's just a space that separates these. Next, it says the maximum width, max width. We want to set that to 500 pixels. And then we want to do the minimum width, so min width. We want to set that to 300 pixels. And finally, we want to set the width to 68 VW. Okay. And so
what this is going to allow us to do, right, is we can expand or we can contract this, and it's going to grow up into a maximum of 500 pixels, and it's going to shrink as low as it can go, which is 300 pixels. So it's just going to pick between the two. As long as we stay in between those ranges, we should be fine for this. All right, let's go ahead and check our code, making sure that works. Let's see here, 60 VW, not 68. So let me go ahead and change that to 60, and let's check our code. All right, congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. All right, so we are on step number 46 here. It says during development, it's very useful to have the field set with the default borders. However, they make the content appear too separated. So let's go ahead and remove the border and add a 2 REM padding to the top and bottom of each field set. Be sure to remove the padding from the left and right. So it kind of gives us a little bit of clues here. So we want to attack here with CSS the field set. So I'm going to type in field set, and we're going to open up those curly brackets. Next on here, we want the border. It says we want it to be removed. So you can't use the keyword remove. The way that we do this in CSS is we just type the word none, okay, and put a semicolon there. And you can see that those borders of the field sets that we had on there earlier, they're gone. Next is, it says on here, we want to have the padding. So we're going to do padding, and then we're going to set that to 2 REM. Now the REM is the root M. And if you remember back at the top, we set that up here to 16 pixels because that's part of the body, right? And so anyways, we're going to go ahead and put the semicolon there. And we do need to make sure that we read this last part here, which is the left and right. We want to remove anything. And so we can do this in a two-step process here by doing the top and bottom. Remember, this first part of this value is the top and bottom. The next value is the left and right if there's only two values on here. All right, so let's go ahead and check our code. We got the congratulations, and we're moving on to the next one. All right, we are on step number 47 of the Learn HTML forms by building a registration form with freeCodeCamp. And on here, it has us do the following. It says to give the field set elements a little more separation, let's go ahead and select them and give them a border bottom. Okay, so that's the keyword here that we're going to use. And then we're going to say, hey, we want to make that 3 pixels in width. We want to make sure that line is solid. And then we're going to supply it with this hex code right here. And that's going to give it the color. I am going to make this easier on me. I'm just going to go ahead and select this right here, copy it to my clipboard. But then I'm going to do border bottom. Again, we can target this. And this one takes 3 different values. And it doesn't matter the order that it goes in, it knows. But we're going to do 3 pixels. We're going to do solid. And then we're going to do that nice little hex code value. Let's go ahead and check our code. And there we go. We're moving on to the next one. All right, we are on step number 48 of the building a registration form for freeCodeCamp. Now it's telling us that the border on the last field set element looks a little out of place. Let's go ahead and add a very specific pseudo class to this called last of type. And this is going to basically go through our entire HTML document, and it's going to look for the very last one of the field set, and it's going to set its border to none, the border bottom to none. And it gives us some example code right here. And you may be drawn to go ahead and copy and paste this and put the stuff in there. But again, the instructions tell us it's the last field set element that it wants to pick up and do this to. I am going to copy this. However, I am going to adjust it to fit my needs. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in there. I want the field set, okay? And so again, it's going to scan the entire document, and it's going to look for our last one, and our border bottom, we want to set that to none, okay? And we can take a look at this here. Let me go ahead and scroll down here for us. And you'll notice here that right where the except, there used to be a line there, and now it is gone. Let me go ahead and comment that in and scroll back down. You can see a line is there right now. And once we comment this back in, the line is gone. And so that's what we're looking for when it comes to this one. All right, let's go ahead and check our code. Make sure we got it. There we go. Moving on to the next one. All right, we are on step number 49 here. It says it would be much nicer if we were to have that label to be appearing right above these input fields, right? Whether that be an input field, whether that be a text area or a select. we would like to make these input fields to span across the entire width of the allowable parent, right? And that's going to be our first step. And then the next step here, it says also add a 10 pixel on the margin for the top, and then set the other margins to 0. So let's go ahead and first target the elements that it wants us to do. And again, we can separate these by utilizing commas. So we can do input, we want the text area, and then we want the select, okay? Then we're just going to do the curly brackets. So we are able to utilize the comma separating for multiple selectors that are going to get the same type of styling. Next, it says on here, let's go ahead and make the width be 100%, okay? And there you go. That all of those have grown, right? It took up 100% of the available space that was allowed by the parent. Next, it says, let's apply a margin to the top of 10 pixels. And so I'm going to utilize the property of margin, and then I'm just going to go around the clock here, okay? And the very first number that it takes is referencing the top, okay? So that's going to be 10 pixels. And if we're going clockwise, the next position that we're going to be talking about, if we're talking about a box, right? Because we're doing 10 pixels on the top. And then on the right-hand side, we want to be 0. And I'm just putting spaces in here in order to fix these things, right? To make sure that they are applying to the right side. Next is the bottom. And the bottom, they want that to be 0 as well. And then the left side, they want that to be 0 also. So this is a shorthand way of going about it, okay, by applying a margin top of 10%, and then the rest all get zeroed out, okay? Now, we can simplify this even smaller if we want, because the value of the left, or the value of the right, rather, and the value of the left, symbolized here, we can actually say, hey, you know what, we can combine those, and we can just remove this one right here, and it gives us the exact same thing, okay? So the way that I would read this is, hey, it's 10 pixels on the top, it's 0 on the left and right, and then 0 on the bottom. And that's how that is read. So let's go ahead and check our code. We got the congratulations. We can move on. Of course, you could have also just applied the other 0 on here, and it would have accepted it also. Okay. All right. On to the next. All right. We are on step number 50 of Learn HTML Forms by building a registration form for freeCodeCamp. It tells us that in the second field set, which happens to be right here, or the account type, it says that it wants the input and the label text to appear on the same line. And right now it does not look pretty, right? So first we need to give the input elements that are in the second field set area, we want to give it a class and have it call inline. Now, just because we give it a class doesn't mean it's going to do anything quite yet, because we haven't done the code for it. But right here, we're just going to do a class. We're going to set that equal to inline. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing to the other one here. We're going to do class, and then we're going to set that equal to inline. Okay. Let's check our code. There we go. We're moving on to the next. Step number 51 says that we need to create the selector for inline, and we want to set the width to unset. This will remove the earlier rule of the input that we applied to be 100%. And so one of the things I did want to bring up to you with this, it says that it changes all the properties that were applied to the element or element's parent to their parent's value. So just because you did unset, it doesn't mean that it just simply goes away and it goes back to its original form. That's not the case. It just changes back to what is inherited by the parent. So let's take a look at this of what it wants us to do. So we want to make that class. So classes have periods. We want to do inline, and then we want to set the width, and we want to do unset. Okay. And now you can see that they are now all together. They're stacked on top of each other, just like it wanted. All right. Let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next. All right. We are on step number 52. We're almost done here. It says here that we would like to add some space to our inline class element, and where the label and the text have a little bit of space in between each other by giving a margin right of 0.5 em, and we want to set the rest to be 0. So how are we going to do this? Let's go ahead and tackle the problem by utilizing the keyword here of margin. And we're just going to pretend we have a box, and we're just going to go around the box, starting with the top. So what do they want us to put there for the top? We want that to be 0. Next is the right. So we're going clockwise around a box, and that is 0.5 m. Next, we want the bottom. So let's go ahead and put a 0 for it. And then the left side, it also wants us to do a 0. And then don't forget we have to put the semicolon at the end. Let's go ahead and check our code, and there we go. Congratulations. So use that box model to help you out with the margins. Right, step number 53 with building a registration form for freeCodeCamp. It's telling us, if we look close enough, you'll notice that the inline elements are really too close to the high on the line. And it wants us to utilize vertical align and send it to the middle. So that's just another property for us to use. So vertical align, and then we want to set that to middle. Okay. And you can see those dots moved around. Let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next. So step number 54, now it's just having us target the input and text area. It's no longer having us do all three, which is the selected as well, right? And so it says that we want to target these two types, and we want to utilize the background color, and we want to set it to this hex code right here. And then we want to give a border here, 1 pixel solid, and this color right here. So let's go ahead and target those two elements, and it's going to be input, comma, text area. Okay. Then inside here, we're just going to do the background color, and we're going to set that equal to, and I'm going to copy this and paste it right here. That way I don't make a typo. And then the next one here is the border. And remember, we can combine all of these here. So it's going to be 1 pixel, solid, and then the hex code that we see here is the exact same as above. And I believe that should fix it. We see that our input elements now have changed, and it does have a border. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. We're going to go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next. Step number 55 in building a registration form for freeCodeCamp. It tells us on here that currently, if you type in the input or text area elements, you'll not be able to see your text. Let's go ahead and test this out real quick. That is correct. You can see I did type in here, but I don't see anything. Next is that to fix this, we're going to change the color, and remember hashtag all Fs. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. It's going to be white. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and I'm going to go ahead and type the word color. And we're going to change that to the hashtag of all Fs. So let's test this out. Perfect. Okay. Now the next thing, it tells us here that the height looks a little squished, which is very true. And we want to change this to 2em. So we want to add a new property on here called minimum height. And then we want to set that to 2em. Okay. And now we can see that it does look a lot nicer as far as height and everything go. Right? Let's check our code. There we go. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next. Step number 56. You want the select element to remain with the white background. However, you don't want it to be squashed. Like you can see right now, this is very squashed. And what we would like to do is make it the same minimum height as the rest. And so what it's having us do is take that min height that we just got doing in the previous step, go ahead and delete it, and we want to move it to all three. We want the minimum height to be applied to all three, not just the input in the text area. So I'm going to get rid of it, and then I'm going to put it right here, and that should fix our issue. And you can see that that select field now does have a minimum height that is not squished, and all of the input fields are exactly the same minimum height. So let's go ahead and check our code. And it looks like it is good, and we're moving on to the next. So step 57, we want to style the submit button that is on our form. So we want to style this button right down here, and we can utilize the attribute selector when we're utilizing CSS. It does give us an example here, and this is why this is just a little bit tricky, and I wish they would have worded this a little bit different. And it says that, hey, here's an example, an input field, and has the square brackets, and it says it's going to look on our web page, and it's going to try to find an input field that has the name attribute of password. If I did take a look at this, and I'm scrolling down here, I have entered the last name, there's the email, and then the password. Like, I don't really have a name of password. So that's why I don't like this example here that they're giving you. because even if we were to use it in our code, it would not even find it because the name that we gave was new password. So anyways, with the question at hand here, it says we want to target the submit button. And if we look at our HTML code and we scroll all the way down to the bottom where our submit button is, what do we have on here that is very identifiable to make sure that this is a submit button? And we have this keyword here of type. Okay, so we can use that as our attribute when it comes to targeting this. And hopefully this will make sense to you, but we're going to target the input field. Okay, but which input field do we want to target? We want to target where the type equals submit. Okay, that's going to help us target this submit button. Now I'm going to go ahead and type in here what does it want us to do. The display needs to be block. Okay, and then the next thing, the width has to be 60%. And then we can take a look here and there's the button. You can see that it shrunk on us and it's all the way to the left. Maybe we're going to center it as well. But anyways, let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next. All right, step 58, with the display being block, which means it takes up 100% of the parent element. It says that it sits flush left to the edge of the parent. Utilize the same technique that we did in order to center the form and apply that to the submit button. Again, that's where we were talking about in the last step. Maybe they're going to want to center this. So if we're going to come up here to the form and take a look at the properties, which one here did we put in here that actually centers it? It's this one right here. So I'm just going to grab it, margin 0, and then auto. And now I can scroll back down and simply apply that right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at that submit button. And it does in fact look centered. Let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. And we're moving on to the next. So for this part here, step number 59 with the freeCodeCamp building a registration form, it talks about adding a height to help us with getting that submit button to look like the other input fields, make the form look a little bit better is what it's really having us do here. So we want to set the height to 2em. So 2em. So we're going to do height. We want to set that to 2em. And then the font size, we want to set that to 1.1 rem. Okay, let's take a look at that button now. It does look a little bigger, so that's perfect. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. Let's move on to the next step. All right, so it says on here for step number 60 with freeCodeCamp's building a registration form, it says make the submit button appear more distinct by giving the background color, and gives us our hex code, and the border color to be white. So let's go ahead and add those things. So it's going to be background color. We want to set that to the hex color that we see right here. I'm just going to go ahead and select it and paste. Next, we want the border color, and we can set that to white, and we can just spell that out naturally. And then we're going to go ahead and check our code. That looks great. Let's take a look at what the button looks like. There we go. A little more distinct, definitely, for sure. All right, on to the next. Step number 61, it says lastly on the submit button, let's go ahead and separate it a little more from the field set. And let's adjust the width to be 300 pixels, to not go below 300 pixels. So to me, in my mind, I'm saying minimum width because I don't want to go below 300 pixels. So let's do that one first. So we're just going to do a min width, and we want to set that to 300 pixels. And then as far as the margin property, we want 1em to be on the top and bottom. So margin, okay. And then again, think about that box model, okay. We want 1em on the top. We want 0 to be, we want auto to be on the, and then we want 1em to be on the bottom. And then we want auto to be on the left-hand side, okay? So don't forget the semicolon. Now, because we have a little pattern here, we can totally shorten this code to 1em. This number here, this value here can be equivalent to the top and bottom. So let's do that. And then the same thing with the auto. So really, we can just get rid of both of these. And the way that I read this is because there's only two values on here, right? 1em, top and bottom, and then auto is going to be applied to the left and right. That is how that one is going to go. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're ready to move on. Let's take a look at our submit button, and that looks fine. And where we're going to see that minimum width, just in case you are wondering, it is when we are expanding and contracting the browser here. That's what we'll see. So feel free to play around with that. Go ahead and maybe change the minimum width to something else, and you'll see that it doesn't go below a certain point. Okay, all right. Step number 62 in this process, it says that most browsers inject their own default CSS values based upon the element. And that's always true. So a lot of these elements that you apply onto your page, they will come with some default values by default, right? And it says if we take a look at the upload the file part right here, the input field for it, that it doesn't look like the rest of the input fields. And that's true. But for this step here, it would like us to maybe start that process by applying padding, the same padding that the other input fields do get. And the way that they want us to target this element is by utilizing the attribute selector. And so we can go input, and then this is where we want to use those square brackets, remember from the previous lesson. And we want the type, we want to set that equal to file. So it gave us a little bit of a hint on there. And then the next thing it says, let's go ahead and just do the very first part of this, which is padding. And we want to set that to 1 pixel and then the 2 pixel. Okay. And that's going to do the following. If I'm reading this, is it's going to do the top and bottom will get applied by 1 pixel. And then the left and right will get the 2 pixel. So let's go ahead and check our code here and see if that's what it's wanting. There we go. And we're moving on to the next. Step number 63 says, speaking of padding, let's go ahead and go back to the submit button. It's sitting at the bottom of the form, and let's go ahead and add a padding to our form, and it will move that button just a little bit down, even though we're targeting the form itself. Okay, so let's do the following. We're going to go ahead and type in here padding bottom. Remember, it only wants the bottom, and we want to set that to 2 EM. And then you will see that it is separating just a little. And then we can go ahead and check our code. And there we go. Moving on to the next. Step number 64, make the input terms and conditions have the attribute or the class of inline. So that's a real simple one. We're just going to come over here to the terms and conditions. I'll just do class. Remember, this can go anywhere you want on here, but I'm just going to type the word inline. And notice that we didn't have to do anything to the class. We should see something right now, and you can see that it shrunk up and went right back to here, and they are buttered up close together now. Oh, so anyways, let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next. Step number 65, lastly, change the text color of the terms and conditions link element to this hex code right here. And then it says, well done, you've completed the final part of the registration form. So if we take a look over here, where is that link of terms and conditions? And right here, it says it is an A tag. So we can come back over to the styles and let's go ahead and type in it. So we're going to do A and then the curly brackets and then the color. We're just going to go ahead and set that to the hashtag that it does give us. And then we want to put the semicolon in there, and let's take a look at the terms and conditions. That looks like it is gray. Let's check our work. There we go. And I think we are done with this. All right, so that completes all of the registration form steps 1 through 65 from freeCodeCamp. And I tell you, if you learned something new out of this, make sure that you comment down below, because we really do read all of your comments and messages that you put on here. So I'm hoping that we cleared some things up and we're just that much closer to getting this certificate, right? So anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.